Hello everyone and welcome to Fuse Room. I'm Alberto as usual, and this is a live stream about bass processing and mixing. Now, I've run some technical sort of like benchmarks and stuff because I'm running a session at a different sample rate, so some people were here. I have to thank Eric for being my guinea pig and kind of, helping me out with all the stuff. I think everything's set up. What we should do is I'm gonna try and hear. Yeah. How about this? Yeah, it works. So my trusty phone is gonna be here in case you have questions and things. And I'm just gonna run you through this cool live stream because it was born from a request of my patrons. So first and foremost, I have to say that this is only possible, if you're watching this thing now, this thing is only possible because of my patrons. So I run a Patreon in which for €9 a month, you can get access to a lot of exclusive videos and music education programs and masterclasses, webinars, whatever you want to call them. There's a private Discord server that we run pretty much 24/7 about recording, mixing, mastering, playing instruments, piano, whatever. So this has gone now for almost a year, and there's people coming in every week or month and I'm really grateful for the support. This is all financial support that goes to my video assistant for the editing whenever necessary, but obviously helps me a lot because it helps me sort of like lessen my amount of paying to her. So it's all in good faith for my young assistant. She's doing an amazing job in editing, but obviously helps me as well because it helps with the monthly wages. Or wages. So why are we running bass processing webinars? Because there was a video that I've done a couple weeks ago at the time of this stream that was about Neve preamplifiers and plugins. So these plugins were used to test which kind of color we get from Neve preamps in the digital recreation sort of environment. But I didn't want to use a session that was completely empty, which could have made sense, but I wanted to use something that was a little bit ready. So I started mixing the song quickly. It took me around half an hour, and I got the mix to work just by using basses. So drums, bass, guitars, keys, lead vocals, backing vocals. And then I used some mix bus, obviously. And that was it. There's only 2 plugins on the lead vocals, and there's only 1 plugin on the, what is it? Like, it's a synth sound. It's a de-esser on a synth sound. So this was pretty cool. The purpose of the video of the masterclass itself was different. We were shooting out Neve preamp plugins, but the request came out from my patrons to say, like, how about mix bass processing and bass processing, most importantly? How do you think about it? What's your mindset? How did you do it? Because that session itself has really no plugins on the single tracks. It only has them on the basses, and sounds pretty cool. So I'm really excited about this. It's fine. We're gonna take a look at the session now, and here we go. I think this is around 40 tracks, 41 tracks. The song is called Brought the House Down. The band is called Sleeps Under Beams, and it's really 40 tracks with no processing whatsoever. You can see that there's only 3 plugins, 2 on lead vocals, 1 on a synth, and then it's just basses. So I want you to listen to the mix, the no mix version. There's nothing on it. Now everything's turned off. I only did volumes. So what I did was run the tracks through, press play, and just do some volumes and panning. And this is what the last chorus sounds like in this shape.
Can I build
Super cool. So this is the Super No Mix. This is what the whole thing sounded like at the end of my pre-mixing. And I really liked it. Obviously, I mean, it wouldn't be a finished mix, but it's impressive the amount of, it's fascinating the amount of steps, the distance between where we started from and where I got it to end. And hopefully this, I really love the song. This passion of mine, Drew, good friend now, he was kind enough to send me this song that you can use, you know, for this stream, just to listen to stuff. It's a really cool song. And I think what I liked about it was that it reminded me of something from the 90s, the good part of the 90s music heritage. Whenever you hear people saying the 90s were the most horrible years in music, it's probably because they got fired from a lot of gigs in those years, but I actually got hired a lot. So I have fond memories of the 90s, and I was only, 18, 16 at the very end of the decade. But there's a lot of music that I like, and I gotta say it shaped in a lot of ways why I, became who I am now. Maybe it's completely ruined my life, but that's what good music does as well. So there's a lot of energy from from 94 to 98, 99 kind of vibe in here. I love how it is, but I had pretty cool ideas and solid ideas of where I wanted to take this premix, but I didn't have much time. The video wasn't based on doing mixing itself, it was just based on shooting out Neve preamps. So what I did was just mix it with the buses. And because people loved how it sounds like, we came up with an idea saying like, well, why don't you show us? And I decided to take this song because out of the many we used in many streams, it only has plugins of buses. So I'm gonna dissect everything I've done. We're gonna talk about everything in terms of plugins, and most importantly, how I really stepped things, one after the other. I'm gonna try and trace everything, every move I made in time. And I remember pretty clearly that it all started obviously with no plugins, but it started from the drums. But the leitmotif in everything I'm gonna do is the sound that started in my head. And it sounds weird, awfully weird. There's no ice cream vans involved, but I gotta say that these really started off from a general idea. I listened to this song, I got a specific vibe of how I wanted it to sound, and it's being inspired from songs that I used to listen to in the 90s, So this is the leitmotif. Again, it is what drove me to conclusions in terms of drums, bass, guitars, backing vocals, etc., and so on and so forth. So I would wanna first say, and we need big camera for this, what I wanna say before we start, because I got your attention, you're kind of fresh, we're all fresh. I want to draw the first and most important conclusion first, before going into the plugins. Hear me out on this one because it's pretty important. There's no right or wrong way to do any mixing. You can start from single tracks, you can start from buses, you can start from the mix bus, you can do everything in between, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you have a solid method that works for you, not for me or anybody else, and that you're capable of transferring the sound you have in your head to the mix session in the easiest, probably effortless way without thinking about it too much. Now, we know this, right? That's old. Like, why is Alberto telling us this? Well, it's super important that we concentrate on two main figures in music production, because the idea of people asking me, can you please tell me how you mix on buses rather than on tracks, comes from the fact that a lot of people are struggling to get good sounding mixes that they don't like what comes out of the mix bus. And there's different reasons for it, but I think one of the coolest ways is, let's analyze the person that usually mixes these days with the 10% of the population mixing songs that is now rare, more and more rare in the years. There's two types of extremes. There's people who do it because they like the craft, and we are extremely lucky to be able to do something we love, maybe get paid for it as well, and just enjoy the process. It's a privilege, so we're humbled, we're super happy about it, but we structure the process in a way that it gives us satisfaction in terms of the craft of the methodology and how it feels to take a song from point A to point B. We enjoy the journey so much just because we like the craft of music production that sometimes the end result is suffering from this whole process. It's like we are stuck in a garage fixing an old car, and we love being in the garage much more actually than actually driving the car itself. And so if we end up driving that car, we might notice that there's a lot of issues we didn't solve, or it just doesn't feel good because we were sort of unpractical in a way. We were enjoying the craft, the garage time so much that we hindered the final result. On the other hand, there's people who absolutely have no time to enjoy the craft. This is rare now, but there's people doing it as a daily job. Those people are not doing it wrong. They actually have a positive side of the coin, which is they gotta get it done. And because they gotta get it done, they have a method that works, a workflow that has little to no time for, singing lullabies to your plugins and stuff. Just get the thing done. Oftentimes, these people might not enjoy what they're working on, might not enjoy the craft of doing it because it's their daily job and they gotta do it before the end of the day so that they can go home and have dinner like normal people. But what comes out of the mix bus, it's pretty cool. And it's what we hear outside there in the industry that usually is more done by people who do it for a job than people that do it as a hobby. So anytime we want to concentrate on what's the best way to mix a song, there is no right answer. But we got to be conscious about the fact that sometimes we might get entangled in the realm of we like the process of making the song so much that we end up forgetting about making it sound good. Or we have no idea how to make it sound good. We just like to move knobs on plugins. There's nothing wrong with that. But bus processing is nothing that you should shift 100% to or just 50% or 30%. There's no right answer. But I hope to give you this additional understanding on how I think about buses because it could speed up your process. If you still want to do single tracks first, drums today, guitars tomorrow, bass the next day, whatever, and then buses at the end of the month, mixing next year, and then enjoy the song and you're happy with it, it's perfectly fine. But if you are struggling with things that never get done, maybe bus processing can be a way to let go of the details and focus on sound more. So whether you end up using it as 100% and then you just do some single tracks, it's okay. If you just use it sparingly, it's okay as well. But it needs to be contextualized, and this is what I wanted to say. So remember what I just said with a big camera that adds emphasis to it. Back to our screen. So, as I said, I started from the drums. So in my idea of this 90s sort of tune thing, I listened to the drums after I've done some balance. I think like the right cymbal might be a little bit on the loud side. I don't really care now. It's fine. I'm not gonna touch it. Let's listen to the drums by themselves. All right. So it used to be a little bit more realistic. Like there are overhead tracks, there are room tracks. I made them sort of 20% of the whole mix, the whole drums bus. I wanted the drums to be a little bit more stable and reliable, almost kind of electronic in a way, because the genres that I wanted to mimic, they kind of had that vibe where the drums never ever give up. And I really loved how they weren't sounding as a realistic kind of drum kit, something from end of the 80s, rock bands. This is more of a produced electronic stuff, and the drums had these way of blending very well with the synths to me. So what I wanted to do is, first off, I got a balance that worked in a way where you hear that the direct sound, kick and snare, is like very prominent, and the room is just adding a little bit of detail. Now, from here on, I wanted power. So I wanted to sort of make the drum kit more musical and more powerful and more together. So I loaded up. This was all done. What I'm gonna talk you through now, it was done in about 30 minutes. Less than 1 hour for sure. So it could be 3/4 of an hour, I don't know. But it was very fast. Now I'm gonna sort of like conceptualize everything, right? So I dialed in a compressor. This is Compressor Bank by Mac DSP. And it's a 4-to-1, attack 1, release 175 milliseconds. Let's hear it without and with. So the first thing I added was quite a lot of gain. I just brought it up to a level where it felt nice. And I usually use the drums right off the bat with my view meters here and the digital meters to kind of get it in the ballpark to where the general loudness of the song will go. So this one, it sounds fun. It started as an Over Easy 2 preset, but then I tweaked stuff around. I don't know what I actually changed. I like this 202 because it has a filter that goes into the detector, and it's not just a high pass for the internal sidechain, it's actually sharper or broader band pass. So I focused on the 575 hertz. There's just a little bit of emphasis there. So the filter is kind of emphasizing that area and the compressor is moving around. It cleans it up, becomes ballsier, has more girth somehow. Girth? I don't know, some balls, we can understand. So from there, I wanted to kind of, use an EQ. I didn't quite think about, I'm gonna use EQ because here and there, but I knew I could sort of clean it up and make it a bit more ready. So I dialed up an EQ, this is Filter Bank, and you see I pumped some 145, I dimmed some 330, I dimmed some 2,295, whatever, and I gained some shelf at 8K. So before and after. Sounds beautiful to me. Sounds cleaner, sounds more in focus. It has more of the harmonics and the emphasis on where the elements are. There's a little bit less hi-hats, there's a little bit less resonances in the in the boxes of the different drums themselves, and there's a little bit more presence of the snare, a little bit more air, and the kick is even more there. What I liked about what Drew sent me is that the kick is pretty what did I want it to say? It's pretty important. Like there's a lot of subwoofer information in there, and it is quite a cool feature. I don't want to lose that because it gives that electronic kind of feel of the drums. So this was just better kind of vibe of the drums, and then from there on, what I did was I used Fuzzbox. So this is probably one of the most important parts. I really hope this can inspire you to just move your mixing from correct and just to Who cares? I'm striving to get a specific tone because people don't care about how correct your mix is. They want to feel something. All right. So here we go with what I said. It has to have that 90s rock singer-songwriter vibe with electronic synths and stuff. So I dialed in a speaker emulator, sort of. Fuzzbox is just an effect, speaker sim, whatever. And I dialed in a Bookshelf Speaker 1. I really liked this. And as you can see, I filtered down the 100 hertz and I pumped up the 2.2 kilohertz. So if you remember, I kind of cut it down in the EQ and now I'm bringing it up. I want to have you hear it with, without and with, but with the 100% wet because I only used 12%. So before and after. Okay, now we're gonna blend it back to 12%. Now, don't tell me you don't hear that the snare has a completely different crunch. It is so subtle, but it is so important. And I really love this move. And again, I'm gonna explain why I did what I did. So in the 90s, the studios were still big and alive, probably. They were dying, but if you wanted to make a record, you would hear that you had to go to a recording studio, something nobody does anymore. But anyway, Bookshelf speakers were the place, the medium, the sort of like a diffuser through which you would listen to what? To your mixes or to the CD you had bought? I think the latter. Like we would use Bookshelf speakers and things that would come out of those speakers were probably a compact disc that some dude had and said like, listen to this song. So in my way of mixing to achieve a tone, I went for, usually, you've seen my streams, I usually do that. I go for psychoacoustic reminders of feelings, not just frequencies, whatever, numbers and stuff. Even if I'm pretty nerdy, I just go for the vibe. And I think that these drums, because of how reduced the environment, the ambience was, I decided to keep the overheads in the room behind, on the back. They needed some body, some atmosphere, some crunch. Sometimes you do parallel distortion, sometimes you do a lot of stuff. Here I went for a speaker simulation that just gives the snare that vibe of the kit that would never give up in the 90s when you would listen to some of my now favorite CDs through Bookshelf speakers. And it just makes things a little bit crunchier and the direction it will go through the keywords is now emphasized, even if it's 12%. Now, the move is huge in terms of concept, but the quantity of it is just 12%. So without context, I would even go more. But once I started balancing things, I ended up at 12. And so there's just a 2.2 kilohertz bump and the 100 hertz cut. You see that this is working on the drum bus, but it's still capable of dissecting an element that I don't want to influence through the Bookshelf, which is the kick, right? Because the kick, I want to keep that hi-fi subwoofer vibe, and the Bookshelf speaker clearly doesn't have that enough lows, right? So you got this, right? It's cool. And I've been using Fuzzbox for so long that I don't even know. I mean, I got that because I know the plugin. But whatever you use, just remember the attitude that I used to get there, the idea behind it. So after that, I wanted the drums to be even more. Who wouldn't? So I dialed in because I didn't have time. I wanted to, sort of dissect and make the best of 3 areas in the drums. I used multi-band compression. These are 3 bands. One band is set at around 100 hertz and the other one at around 2K. And now I'm capable of handling dynamics in extreme lows, mids, and highs differently. So before and after. Why is this move important? It is because the drum kit now has no compromise. It really never surrenders. It gives it out all. And what I can hear from being 1.70 m, whatever, from my near fields is that without this compressor, without this processing, I was plenty capable of hearing the drum kit. I'm still capable of hearing the drum kit, but now I feel the drum kit. That's super important. Can you achieve these with single tracks? I don't know, because it's so rationalized and it's so unorganic. If you do it with single tracks, it might work for you. But to me, what I've learned a lot from people doing rock and stoner rock, even heavier genres, is that multi-band compression on the drum bus, it works. And so the difference is the kit is really just better. I don't know. And I mostly can hear and feel the kit. And it's that there's a difference between hearing it, like, okay, yeah, I can hear it, sounds great. Now I can also feel it from 6-inch woofers. So that's good. I want it to go full blast. So that's important. So you see all the ratios are all over the place, 4, 128. The attacks are 61, 0.3, whatever. This was done, you guessed it, by ear. How cool is that? Some people still do that. Auto releases, whatever, byte differences. It's a specific compressor. This one I've used a lot in the years. And so obviously once you click with something, you go fast. I had to go fast. Now, next step, I liked where it was going, but I missed an important element of the psychoacoustic effect and also technical mix element. The drum kit was lacking, but it could help having some sense of stage to the whole performance. And drums are awesome for that because they have fast transients, and when they let go, they reveal the ambience around. So they're fantastic ways of just putting the entire band in an environment, even if just the drum kit has that specific tone. Now, instead of doing buses, auxes like send, retard and stuff, I placed lustrous plates, which I love, and you know that, on the drum bus. And I didn't use any EQ. It starts up with chrome plate, and I used chrome plate, and then I used reverb time damper, whatever. I dialed it, as you can see, and it went from this to this. It's to before and after. So beautiful. And it does 3 things. Number 1, it creates the idea of drums on stage, which is one of the best feelings we ever felt when we were at a rock concert. Number 1, it's super important. Number 2, it fills back the mids and the ambience that I dehydrated when I chose the volume settings to be like a little bit of room and just a lot of direct mics. Gives it back, but it gives it back not in an acoustically organic way. It gives it back as an effect, so it's like really consistent and rationalized. And I just loved how Lustrous Plate sounds in all of its plates. Number 3, it makes the drums wider, stronger in terms of resilience, like the foundation of the mix, and it pushes them just ever so slightly in the back of the stage, where the drummer would actually be if you were looking at stage, concert, whatever, right? So all of these in one plugin, right? And in like 2 modes. Super important, however, because drums will not be able to carry the entire chorus if they don't have that vibe. I like them straight ahead without reverb, but they're not gonna support, and we gotta, let go. They need to support rather than being up front. We have other stuff up front. Last but not least, feather touch. I dialed in an EQ. I think this one I did once I had stuff in context, but I want you to listen to it by itself just because it's easier to explain. But everything was playing and I was like, all right, I like the drums, but they could be a little bit more like easier on the mid frequencies. So before and after. I think you can really hear it. Now, think about this. There's a -1 dB at 300 and there's a -0.24 at 705. But the cues are not too sharp, so they gather a lot of frequencies around. They group a lot of frequencies around, and that -0.2 you can really feel. It cleans it up again. So I'm doing like one step forward and one back. I don't know how many forward and how many back, but you see I'm like constantly adding something one way and then taking it away. And I just realized that. Maybe that's the secret sauce. I don't know. But I really like the drums, how they were. And I can finally move to bass. It's fantastic. So with this support, let's listen to the bass track. There's only one bass. And it sounded like this. Right? It's lower because it's in the balance of the mix. Now let's hear, I'm just gonna crank it up a little bit just so that you can hear it better. Is there anything wrong with this bass? There's a sort of a comb filter in between and it's stereo. So it could be super cool, could be an artist's choice, whatever. I didn't go for that. So I opened up MSCD and I completely castrated, technical terms, the side. So now it's a 100% flat mono sound. And this was at -7.5, but as you can see, I bumped it up at 8. So again, in the heat of the moment, I could have done -0.5 and forget it, but it sounds like this, before and after. It still has that comb, but it's 100% mono because there's no time, there's no room for doing anything at all. Then I actually opened one of my favorite plugs, which is the 6060 channel strip. And the way this is working is as follows. Well, that's pretty complicated. I mean, there's only one plugin, right? But when you open it, there's 6 modules in here for bass. So let's hear how it sounds before and after. Now, Mac DSP should just call and, I don't know, say like, Alberto, your Lamborghini is waiting for you outside of your house because you just sold millions of 6060. But the reality is there's not gonna be any Lamborghini waiting for me outside. And the second reality is it's effortless once you know the modules and how they work. It was really quick to do, but I've used the 6060 forever. Or the 50 before, 60 when it came out. But these versions of Mac DSP module-based plugins, I really love how they sound because they incorporate basically whatever they had and just made it a little bit more convenient, plus they add something. So you see 6 modules, but look at the bottom of it. You have 3 of them marked with A and 3 of them marked with B. So you have cyan and you have yellow. So you see on the top right of the plugin, you have A and B. So there's actually 2 buses happening at this time. They're going in parallel. The first 3 modules are bus A and the second 3 modules are bus B. So what I'm doing is I filtered the lows, I emphasized some of the, no, I actually cut some of the mids. What frequency was this? 200 hertz I cut. I compressed it with an optical and I added quite a lot of tape, compression, and saturation. But then I built a second bus that I used to get an amp sound, but not a real amp simulator sound, more of a fake one. So there's an EQ that's bumping some of the lows and it's cutting some of the highs. There's an over EZ3, which is sort of like, I think, a DBX kind of thing, giving it a very consistent mojo. And then there's Moody, which is a distortion, like a tube distortion thing, cranked at maximum. Look at those knobs. Maximum drive, maximum tone, maximum low cut. Sounds like a video game, but that's what I did. And I really like the tone, and with the drums, they sound like this. Man, cool. And you see how they work together, right? There's no sidechain or anything, but the mids that the bass has go really nicely in between the mids that the drums don't have, right? And it's a little bit like the environment between the two is not totally compatible. Like the bass is kind of a bit more dehydrated and a bit drier, and the drums sound like in concert, but with the guitars and stuff, they kind of blend in better. But I really like this. Now, this is really me, and it's a taste thing. You might not love it, I don't know. It's just like I tend to go for these sort of drums and bass behavior in these kind of tunes. I've done it a lot of times, and I've used plenty of plugins, but I always end up in the same way because I want that vibe. I don't know, everybody does it differently. So, what did I do next? I actually don't quite remember. I think I did guitars, probably. So guitars sounded like this. I only did some volumes and panning. And I gotta say, this has a lot to do with the 90s tone that I got an influence from when I listened to it, because it's so scooped, and scooped is really the right term, and also 90s somehow. There's that shrill from the guitars that a lot of people in the vintage era hate. I kind of think that there's a space for it. A lot of famous bands and records and stuff, even in their lives, they used to have this sort of hi-fi thing. They almost sound already as if they're coming through a speaker of sorts. So here, I only used one compressor. I can't believe I only did this. What is this compressor doing? I don't remember. So let's try before and after. So it is bringing the volume up a lot, for sure, because I couldn't care less and I was heading to mix and stuff. But I gotta say that the way it's crunching things together is sort of emphasizing the mid frequencies, right? There's a tendency for it to kind of keep the transient somehow, because 5 milliseconds attack is not really helping reshape the sharp attacks, which I kind of thought were a feature. Sometimes I go closer to the 1 millisecond just to get these fast transients to be there. But these were a feature that I really liked. Very slow release at 550, and it's floating around. It's 5 to 1. I really don't remember thinking about a lot of stuff. The preset I used is mostly Manley, for sure. You can see that, which is emulating probably some tube compressor by Manley. But the idea was just to get things meatier in a way and sustain more in choruses especially. So with the drums and bass, never a compromise. Guitars sustain in their wall, the bass is always there pumping, but it's not influencing the high frequencies too much, it's not bothering the kick. We don't have vocals yet, so problems might arise, but the drums are pointy, but together there's no mix bus compression at all. So the other thing I did quite easily was using a Varimu Tuco on backing vocals. So the backing vocals without Tuco sound like this. Let's do a before and after. Okay, and these tracks have effects on it. So we could open a second subtopic, which I won't, but we could. It's like, do you need stems from artists that are completely dry, not the artists, but the stems? Do you need like things to be 100% separated and whatever? No. If you work with an artist that has a vision, and I would like to say that Drew, to me, and the band itself, they do have a vision, the last thing you want to do is get those reverbs away and just do your stuff. Because when I do my stuff, it's not gonna sound that way. It's gonna be more expensive to them because it's gonna be more time. They're gonna be disappointed because they worked on that sound. It doesn't work. So take it from there and go on. The question is, how do I know if it's a bad tone or if it's a good one? Well, I can tell you that technically I hear stuff that would need to be fixed, sort of. Like there's a lot of lows. The sound of these microphones is a little bit, I don't know, it sounds to me as if they used a microphone without a proper preamp. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe they were EQ'd that way. They're kind of sharp somehow, but do I care? No. Does it have a tone? Yes. They blend well and they're already panned, so there's a lot of thinking behind. So what did I do here was I engaged a Varimu compressor. This is set to limiter fast attack, and let's hear it before and after. So I kept it in stereo vintage, so the two channels are now working together. It's losing vibe, for sure, but it's gathering around the lead vocals. I didn't want to have the backing vocals too wide, and they're already plenty wide. Sometimes they're 100% there. So we're gonna listen to the lead for keys and lead, then I'm gonna have you listen to the lead with the backing vocals because it's very peculiar. Their function is only to support the lead. They need to be supported. Even if they were built for other reasons, the fact that it's the third chorus and they're under the lead makes them mandatory for support. So they need to be there. So I think Tuco I love, absolutely. Like it works on everything, and it's probably one of my 2-3 favorite Varimus. I would say 2, probably. That's sharp to say. Keys. What did I do to the keys? Only mild equalization. So let's try this. I took some low, like mids 1K and high mids away because they were probably interfering with the lead vocals. So let's hear it before and after. And I wanna, like there's no Lamborghini for anybody except for me. Have you heard how the soundstage changes completely? Have you heard how there's less priority in the frequencies that make the synths like there? They're in solo, right? We can't hear drums, bass, whatever, but do you get the feeling that this sound, compared to the others we heard, is placed a little bit behind, and it's just rounder somehow? And once you start working in solo, but you've worked with a lot of contextual material and stuff, there's no genius behind it. It's just a ear memory in this room, those speakers, the plugins. You get the idea, you know where it's gonna sound, You know what it's gonna sound like and where it's gonna get placed. They sound fine. There might be a little bit sharp, but the difference between with and without EQ is that with the EQ, it sounds like they're in a record and they're getting soloed somehow, but their position is just where the canvas of keys need to be. Now I play keyboards and piano, so obviously I might, be a little bit more sensitive to where I need to be, because if I step on top of the guitars, it's usually not where the synths might need to be in this kind of genre. So obviously there's a sort of a microscope view that I have, but let's hear it with guitars. There's not much difference with the guitars, but they kind of go a little bit like 1 meter behind, and they make room for lead vocals. So, which is what we have to listen to. So lead vocals by themselves were like this, without the two plugins that I've placed. So this is really naked how they were.
Did you love me? I just want to be the star of my memory. From center stage, you play the part so well.
Right? So what I wanted to do is, I like the fact that there's 3 tracks already affected. Again, didn't want to change this, but I wanted the lead part to be more. And so what you do is 1176. And then I added a Vari-Mu. Like the combination of these 2 dudes here is another Lambo waiting outside. So let's do the FET first, and then we hear it with Tuco.
Did you love me? I just want to be the star of my memory. From center stage, you play the part so well. Now your ghost stands in your place.
You hear how the main vocal just jumps that little bit farther away enough, just for the singer to say, I'm still the singer of the band. Like, we're a band, but, I'm the singer of the band. And it needed that placement. So it's a little bit more forward. The FET compressor sounds like my 1170, like that lows build up, which is theoretically wrong. It's so powerful for the message of lyrics and stuff that I always end up with 76s, and the Vari-Mu after is just like the icing on the cake because it compensates the unruly behavior. Also has a tape quality to it that I always loved from Tuco. So, but the whole bus got through a different compressor. So this one started as Brit Vocal, which is a preset I found to like. Again, I had no time, I had to go, so I dialed in a preset, and I have no idea what I changed. But let's try before and after. Now, this is not just one vocal, this is the 3 yellow leads, all right? So it's the main lead with the doubles, sort of. So before and after.
Did you love me? I just want to be the star of my memory. From center stage, you play the part so well. Now your ghost stands in your place. You brought the house down.
It's a Brit it's insane how whoever named this Brit vocal, just like he's a champion of preset naming. It wasn't me. But I think the reason why this works is that 3-to-1, little bit of bite and need dialed knowing the compressor we're striving for. And this sounds to me as a little bit of a 33-609 mixed with the SSL SSL channel compressor. I can't touch it, but I would say, yeah, it's totally Brit for some reason. But it just makes the vocals sort of work around the important part of the speech. It doesn't feel like the 0.25 whatever super fast attack, but it is very fast. And so it formats the vocals to stick there and never ever come off. So it has a limiter function, but it's only a 3-to-1 ratio. Beautiful. I really like this. So in the end, we had, well, there was one keys track that I put a de-esser on. Let's hear it without and with. It was a little bit sharp. So without and then with. In the context of the full mix, it works. Here, I kind of hear the problematic area maybe shifting, but I didn't want to carve it too much, but that's what I did. It was the last plugin we had to see. So now it's a mix bus turn. And did I do the mix bus this way? I gotta reveal that I might have not done it this way. Like I didn't do drums, bass, guitars. I'm trying to conceptualize something that happened under sort of like a trance, whatever. I know, no, but it was a matter of readjusting stuff. I might have done the last plugin on the drums once I had the mix bus going, but if I don't rationalize this, now that we're dissecting the mix bus processing and the bus processing, it's never gonna work. But just trust me, it's never that, pinpointy, because otherwise I would be an AI doing this, and I am not. So what I really liked to start with was the last plugin in the row. So I actually listened to the limiter in the very first step. So I used a preset that I made some time ago called Netrunner's Master, which has nothing to do with the genre at hand. Absolutely. And I changed it obviously because it doesn't work. But it started like this. I only had the threshold and ceiling at -0.2 and no multi-band action. Now this plugin we should probably keep here all the time because it's gonna show us how the limiter that I placed almost first, it's actually building up in the mass of plugins that we have. So I'm gonna keep it there for everybody to read. But without and with, the whole mix would sound like this, with everything on. So I'm pick limiting already. How do I explain this? All right, I explained it this way. I had it on and I didn't quite look at it. I don't have it on and visualize, but I kept these on. And when you saw the various plugins adding gain, we noticed, right? There were 3 or 4 of them that were adding quite a lot of gain. The end result is also the sound that I had hitting the limiter. Now, how much limiting I'm getting, I would guess it's usually around 1 dB, maybe 1.5 at snare hits. But because I had this thing on, the sort of like the net around the maximum energy available was always kind of containing the final result. It's like having a final glass in which you can only have that much water or fluids, right? So you put blue, red, green, but you can't ever go past the glass because the limiter allows you to only have the maximum amount a glass can fill. And if we go past that, the limiter is gonna sort of rework the balance of the other colors. I find these one of the most elusive things to explain because it has to be seen in real time. I'm a believer of people being physically in the room. Unfortunately, there's various reasons why we can't do it, and you're all from all over the world. But if you do it with the person next to you who's handling these with like an image next to the meter where you can take a look at from time to time, you're gonna realize that a lot of engineering goes towards kicking that limiter a little bit. And that mantra of having a maximum that cannot be surpassed actually makes the interaction with the instruments go. So I know for sure I just kept -0.2 as a reference just because I didn't want red peaks, and I mixed that in. And I had no multi-band action whatsoever. So if I remember right, I didn't work with the multi-band at all, and from the limiter on I started building my mix bus, right? And I went for what I thought would sound cool. So the first plugin I used in the chain is Kelvin. How cool is this? I actually dialed in a saturation plugin. Now, I'm not gonna say anything. Let's go without and with. I really have, this is the fourth Lambo that's coming out today. So Tone Project should call and say like, you know what, you got enough Lamborghini, we're sending you a Ferrari. It's okay, it's fine, can leave it there. I have, can I name the model? Kelvin, people, you've seen me using it in a lot of situations. We're talking next gen plugins. This thing is doing such a gentle little intervention with such strong hand, and it knows exactly where to stop. It just sounds fantastic. Now, if you can't hear the difference between without and with, it could be your monitoring, it could be that you're not too used to it. So what I suggest you do, because you're watching these from the future, is do two things. Lower the volume to almost alarm clock level in the morning, unless you keep it blasted, like very gentle, and try and hear it again. And second of all, I want you to concentrate when you listen to it to the in-between innards, the guts of the mix, the place in which, imagine the stage, right? You have a drummer, bass, guitars, synths, and vocals and backings. All of these people have 2 feet each and they're on stage, right? But there's air between them, right? I conceptualize that usually that way. There's a space between a singer and the bass, the singer and the drums, the bass and the guitars. There's air, physical air. The stage is not full. Now, we are working on the density and color of that air. And it makes no sense because you don't do that live usually unless you put smoke machines or whatever, it's cannons. But that's how it feels to me. Like there's a mixing stage in front of me. I got a wall obviously in front of me here and speakers and panels, but to me there's no wall. There's an infinite black in which this band is playing. There's a world I'd rather be in every time I mix. And if that doesn't happen, why do I want to visualize that? And with all the cars, power cars, sport cars I have now, after all these plugins, it's really, really that important. We're saturating, we're colorizing, it's actually the word I was going for, which doesn't exist, colorizing the air around the musicians. And there's a crispiness, there's a quality, there's an euphonic vibe that blends the harmonics and the way they all react together that I think this plugin is amazing for. The stages, the shaping features, I have videos on these so I won't stay on more, but why did I do it? The why is important, and this is pretty capable. Would tape do this? Absolutely. It's the saturation approach that does it. Now, after Kelvin, which sounded really, really cool, I was pretty happy, but I wanted to see if I could sort of like give it more 90s vibe, right? So, one plugin I remember I had is called NTP 179-400. It's actually not called that way. It's how I call the setup, to remember. It's called VML Gold Edition, and Alex P makes this. It's a Nebula library, and this is the clone, the emulation of the famous NTP's compressor, the 79-400. So they made a lot of them, and the 179-400 is usually the most sought after or one of the most iconic. Now, this is a program limiter. I think it was meant to be a limiter for broadcast, maybe, or something like that. What I liked to use it on this time was to actually engage the recovery, which wouldn't exist, I think, on the real unit. And I only mixed it in for like less than 20%, right? Let's hear what this does. Why did I use the NTP 179-400? Because I know a lot of music I love from the 90s used to have this trick. Like it, let's hear what it does, without and with. It doesn't sound like compression. It sounds like the band has been playing together for a very long time, and it sounds like the radio a little bit, like things are always correct in a way, like they're not really coming out at me. And I like it even without, I gotta say, I gotta admit, it sounds better. Maybe it grabs you by, you know, the shirt a bit more, but there's that passionate but detached presentation in this version. Like the band is there, the radio channel is broadcasting this song, whether you like it or not. These folks are famous because they're on the radio and you are not. So it's kind of that sad, very sad and very violent message, but gives me that idea. Like, we're not trying to grab your attention. The song's amazing. The band's already famous. That's what the NTP 179-400 is to me. Getting really good at like explaining things in a way, I don't know, that I hope it works for you, but you know, I would be lying if I would say that this is not 100% what I feel, for sure. Afterwards, the Nashville touch. So what I liked from one of the old tape emulations, I used to have this years ago. And then I kept it for a very long time and then sold it because the company had gone whatever, nobody was replying to the phone, but now they're making it again. But Alex B, again, made a Nebula library of these. And sometimes it's the tape emulation I want to use when I don't want tape emulation, but I want that Nashville rock touch. I don't know. I've been in a couple studios in Nashville where they had these when it was hot, you know, the unit. And they were putting it everywhere. And because of how the songs were arranged, it just got stuck with me. So it's a tape emulation of a ATR 102, but the plugin emulates a device, a hardware piece of device that emulates the ATR 102. So it's not about the ATR specifically, it's about how the unit kind of sounds. And I use tape 3, I think it's a GP9, whatever, tape formula, a bit more modern, 15 IPS. And afterwards, I used a JFET stage. So JFET wouldn't by all means be, you know, sort of like warm and deep. It's actually a little bit on the harsh side, but it's emulating the output stage of these fake out tape emulator, right? So let's try it without and with. So you notice that the second one is off. When I press play, I was like, all right, hold on, how do we do that? All right, so I placed the JFET. Now we only heard the ADR, and I really like how it darkens things up in a good way. Like there's those sharp transients in the highs that I usually associate with cheap converters somehow. It's much darker now, for sure. But how about the JFET? I noticed that I turned it off. So probably in the end, for sure, I didn't use it. Let's find out why. I'm going to keep the ATR on, and we're going to just engage power on the JFET stage. All right. Honestly, if I had to use these two, by all means, I was right in using the JFET after the 102 because the highs that we lose from the tape, we gain back from the saturation of the JFET stage. So these two things are insane, and you could even add more stages like transformer, like tubes. You can add, nobody prevents you from adding 2 line amp stages. I've done it. Do I like this? Yeah, absolutely. I love the unit, and I think it's a nice photograph. It's pretty appropriate to how I remember it. And I really like how the two combined together sound. We sort of rebalance the things and we glue high frequencies even more together rather than just the lows, and we kind of propel it forward. But I kept it off. The reason for this is that I probably liked what the next plugins were doing more to regain highs. And this plugin, most of you know it already, it's called Celestial, and Acoustica Audio makes it. And this is an emulation of an SSL Fusion, I think. And there's a lot of stuff that they do. What I used here was just the preamp and the drive. I loaded some harmonics. That probably explains why I didn't end up using the JFET. And I used a little bit of stereo widening and dimension. So let's try it without and with. It's a record. It sounds more like a record. It's not trying to overwhelm me with high frequency definition, with jumpy transients. That's not how you get your audience to like a mix. I like that sort of peaceful presentation. That's what I call it. Like, we're here. If you don't want to listen to us and keep us in the background, it's fine. It's okay. If you want to listen it full blast, it's okay. If 20 years from now you're going to listen to it, you're going to cry again, I guarantee you that. That's the kind of songs that I aspire to because I haven't mixed them. I was too young. But I certainly listened to them and I enjoyed them. So, really nice. Did I use everything here? No. Did I want to? No. Have I ever used this plugin? No. Have I ever used the SSL Fusion? Yes. Did it sound close to my expectations? Yes, it did what I kind of remember the thing would do. We are gaining harmonics the way that the Anamod wasn't doing, but I like it as well. And it's a bit more widescreen somehow, right? We lose a little bit of gain, but that's okay. Last but not least, what did I do here? Oh, we're talking again, feather touch. I'm reducing 482 Hertz by 0.42. So I think I did this after I engaged the multiband on the ML8000. At some point, probably at the very end, I did engage the multiband here and I retouched the frequencies the way you see here because my preset Netrunner's master, it's done for a soundtrack. It's completely different and stuff. But I liked where the crossovers were and I used it as a starting point. So let's hear how the multiband sounds without the EQ, right? Without the preemptive EQ that I just used to lower stuff. So without and then with multiband from the ML8000. The master peak limiter still gonna be there. We're just injecting the multiband engine. You know already, I love this plugin. It doesn't matter how you touch it or whatever. It is louder. It is louder with the multiband, but don't deny the fact that the lead vocals are so proper now, so expensive, so record, so important, so, famous recording studio kind of stuff. And the ML8000 is just a perfect finisher. It works on every genre. It's super complicated to use. I won't deny it. I don't care what MacDSP says. Do this, do that. It is a hard plugin to master. At least in my case, it was. It was really, really complicated. Sometimes it was like, oh, that's frustrating. Everything's overhyped, whatever. But once you trust that you gotta learn it and just spend some time with it without the pressure of stuff, it becomes effortless, and now I'm using it pretty much every time. It might be that I don't use the multiband or use it just ever so slightly, but then the next thing I did was like, I just wanna have a little bit less mids. And let's try it without and with these minus, it's like not even half a dB at 482. Do we hear it? Let's try and hear it. Maybe I was just, overly zealous. The energy just bounces back and forth much better. It's cleaner because the 482 has so much mud and energy that 0.42 just makes the whole thing propel. Now, why did I wait to let you hear this EQ? Because as I said, I dialed it in after the multiband was done. And this static EQ band hitting minus 0.42 at 482 hertz influences the multiband engine so much that that's why you can do 0.42 and go like, wow, this changes so much, because we're hitting that nice bell within the guts of the multiband. So now the energy distribution is different, the bands work differently, and you see like all of these crossovers, there's 8 areas, there's 7 crossovers. They breathe differently. Sometimes I do this like a lot. If I still can't find the right balance of the single bands, I know where to stop and I dial in an EQ before the ML8000. So one of the advices I would give you is don't struggle too much. After 95% whatever that you have that sound and it vibes right, stop, do something preemptively into the 8000. I almost wish they had an EQ in there, but you can use an EQ, whatever. So that is all. That is all I've done. I have no idea how much time I used, maybe 1 hour or so. So kind of 1-to-1, I think maybe a little bit less. Buses and Mixbus. There's really 3 other plugins on programs. The rest was how it was written, how it was arranged, how it was recorded, and how I did volumes and pans. The choice of effects and stuff, there's really nothing to sweat about if things work the way they should. So the importance, again, of this is that I'm not trying to tell you that bus processing and mixing is superior to single tracks. I'm not trying to convey that message. I'm not trying to say that one plugin on the mix bus is going to be always your thing. I doubt that anybody has used this mix bus or even 20% of this mix bus that you're watching here. You probably start off with a different plugin. You use different tapes emulation. You don't have some of the libraries I have. You don't use maybe the limiter I do. Does it matter? No, because the music has a message in it. We're just trying to get it out better, to translate better through the speakers. So you're not hearing the plugins. Who cares? You're hearing the energy that's getting brought out. And there's a point at which I would stop. And in fact, I did stop and I said, all right, these I like and I find interesting. So again, there's no right or wrong. Just remember that sometimes the most important message I can leave you again is that if you work with too much of an intention of enjoying the journey rather than going anywhere, you're gonna enjoy the journey, you're never gonna get anywhere though. So because mixing has become a task that people do also for pleasure, and it's not just a task you do as a daily job, we run the risk to not be on point. This mix I've done, it was just for a pre-mix for a plugin shootout. So I couldn't spend 6 months on it. There's no sense, right, in doing that. I spent 30 minutes. And I still think it sounds good. I don't regret any choice. So my question is, why don't you do those 30 minutes to mix any other song? Don't let your ego say, it's just 30 minutes. It's not enough. It's plenty. It's okay. If it sounds good, it's okay. Remember to listen, to ponder your steps, to know the plugins you're using. Don't go for the new toys all the time. And if you go for the new toys, master them before you go around, and just listen to the stuff. Make sure you have a good listening environment. You spend time listening to stuff, and maybe, I don't know, also mix stuff you like. Life is a balance, and I'm the last person to be followed in this sort of guru kind of thing. But there's a balance in everybody, and we gotta remember that sometimes the process itself becomes the end of all things, and it's not about it. It's just about mixing whatever song you're doing. All right. So thank you very much for staying with me. I thought and hoped, but I also I'm pretty confident this was useful, and it's gonna sparkle some curiosity in whatever process I've used. Remember the important stuff I've said. We're gonna see each other soon in the next stream. I'm really happy that I'm kickstarting the new year with this stream. And as usual, if you have questions, write them. Remember, this was possible just because of my patrons. So if you're watching this from the future and it's free, there's people who support my channel and stuff that are actively in the Discord server for €9 a month, which I super appreciate. I value, even 1 penny from anybody, and this is great help. But on the other hand, it's really not that much if you want to learn a lot. So maybe you could become somebody who supports the next video for somebody else that wants to make music and is struggling with it, right? So think about that. Think about everything we've said. I'll be here. Get in touch. Bye-bye. Ciao.